I am drawn to photographing water. I enjoy capturing the movement of water, freezing the motion of a droplet, or trying to convey the immensity of an ocean. While I always enjoy the technical challenges of photographing water, it is when I recognized that the water was evoking a wide spectrum of emotions that I began to seek out its various forms. Whether drowning in fear or buoyant with confidence, the water and the emotion have become reflections of each other. Both subjects are essential to each photograph, less meaningful without the other. Over the past several years, I've been fascinated by the subject of water. I hope to take you on this journey with me, absorbed in emotion, captivated by water, immersed.
Laura, you are a photographer, you are a physician. There are probably other talents that you have in areas of interest. We look forward to learning all about you today and sharing what you have discovered in your life with members of the community. How would you say being a physician and being a photographer are related?
I guess I would say that they both require attention to detail and observation, that they probably both help each other in that way, that just observing the things in the world around you or observing things in a patient can really tell you a lot.
Did you always have that attention to detail growing up?
You'd have to ask my mother. I don't know. I think I probably did. I've always been the person who wants to organize everything or get everything all squared away. So I think I probably did. But all of this going through the creative process of photography has really gotten me to slow down and think about it more than I ever did before.
And were there certain things growing up that inspired you or caused you to think creatively and want to make something?
There's not a particular moment that I can point to like that, but I think the thing that really sparked my photography interest was the birth of my son. And when he came along, and I just wanted to take beautiful pictures of him as an infant, and you see other people's work that they do that, and I thought I could probably learn how to do something like that. And that's when I really started to try to learn the art of photography.
So your son was your first subject.
Absolutely.
Well, that certainly is an inspiring event, becoming a mother and seeing this child that you've created. What were the first photographs that you remember seeing in your childhood, and was there a particular feeling that gave you?
You know, there are always pictures in your memory, like photographs you've seen. And one of them I just recently asked my father to go back and find, and it was one of those vacation shots of my father in the foreground with his hands like this, and my sister and I way in the background looking like little tiny people standing on his hands, right? Everybody's done these little tricks with photography, and that's not a new concept, but it's something that I've more recently been sort of adapting to my photography, using the tricks of depth of field and things like that to create something new that isn't actually there. So I was thinking back about my father doing that trick and trying to find that old photograph.
Awesome. Well, I could see, in looking at your work where you definitely use a lot of techniques and experimentation to convey messages. So with your installation at the James Library, you have selected specific photographs and a theme. Can you share that theme with us today and any techniques that you found especially helpful?
Yeah. So the theme of the show it's called Immersed, and it's all about how water makes you feel. We sort of know intuitively that water, it comes in all these different forms, and sometimes it can be fierce and unrelenting, and you think of a flood or a tsunami and how scary and frightful that is. But at other times, water can just be calm and glass and the surface of a lake that just feels so calm and welcoming. But it's the same substance, it's just still water. So I set out in this project to try to figure out what it is about the look of it that makes you have a feeling about it. And we know through film and literature, we use water as a metaphor for feeling all the time. But what type of water says joy, or what type of water looks frightful?
Right.
So that was the idea behind the project.
What about, because you mentioned the range of feeling that can come from water, both peaceful or destructive, is there anything that you draw upon when you are capturing an image of water that has a less than peaceful quality?
It's not really that I'm pulling always something personal that I'm trying to, but I'm trying to convey to other people what they might see in it or what they might feel in it. So just how do you make it look more fearsome? Is it the lighting? Is it the color that's associated with it? What are the things that when you put it two-dimensional are going to make it still have that feeling as if you were there?
Are there techniques that you use in your photography that you favor, one more than the other, or that give you a more dramatic effect?
I try to use a lot of different techniques, and it depends on what I'm trying to get across. So, for instance, there's a photograph in the installation here that is an image of a beach boardwalk leading out to a sunset at a beach. And by itself, it's a beautiful area, it's a beautiful image. And the photograph was taken at a friend's house where she grew up going to that beach house in the summers with her family. And what I really wanted to do for them was to take the picture, sort of put myself in a really low angle in that boardwalk, and use that perspective from getting down really low on it so that you feel like a child walking through that boardwalk, so that for them, as now they're adults, but they can look back at that and get that feeling of being a child running down that boardwalk again.
Oh, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. How did they react to seeing that photograph from that perspective?
Yeah, so my friend and her sister, I mean, they love the photograph, and I've never told them that I got down low and that was what I was trying to do, but I think that they feel it. I think that they respond to it probably more that way than if I had taken it more traditionally.
So speaking of children, you're a mother to an 9-year-old boy.
8-year-old boy.
8-year-old boy. How would he describe you? Notwithstanding, being a physician and being an award-winning photographer, but how would your son describe Mom?
Well, I hope he would say that I was fun and awesome and amazing, but he helps me a lot with photography projects, and he really does get excited and to be involved in the projects, and sometimes he and I just play around. So I like to try to draw the creativity out of him while I'm trying to work on a piece. And we've done things where we turn him into a Jedi Knight, or things that he really enjoys doing too.
Yes, so. That 8-year-old boy perspective.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sure would come through. So taking photographs and then I guess the old-fashioned word would be developing or processing your work. Are there techniques that you would not ever find yourself using, or are you open to experimentation? And the reason why I ask that is because the current younger generation, they are growing up with tools of their own on their smartphones, and smartphones have pretty good, decent quality cameras, and they have filters and editing, color treatment, saturation that they can use. Are those techniques that you use, or are there computer-generated techniques that you would not use?
Yeah, so I think in any fine art photography, you do need to go back through your images and do some editing. And whether that's, I'll do sort of cropping the image to get a better composition. And there are some, making sure the focus is spot on and getting the colors just right. And those are things I'll do in sort of post editing. And my mind is always open to something that will create some beautiful art. But in these most recent years, I try to create everything in the camera. All of the illusions that I do are in the camera. So I don't Photoshop in an element that wasn't there. So for instance, there's a photograph here. It's a self-portrait of me walking on water on the ocean. And that is not me Photoshopped into that picture. I had to create that illusion with manipulating the scene and what was around me.
Would you like to explain how you did that
Yeah,
so that
I
we
will.
might all walk on water?
You can walk on water too. So growing up here in Massachusetts, I know the Cape pretty well, and probably a lot of people that grew up around here know that if you go to Mayflower Beach, there's sandbars that go a long distance in the water. You can go a long way out on the sandbars. So I waited patiently for the water to just fill in all those sandbars and walked out as far as I could with the camera on a tripod, clicking away as I walked. The hardest part was that I did this in May, and early spring is not the time you want to get in the water
Right.
in New England. So the air temperature and water temperature were probably about 50 degrees, and I was barefoot in a flowy dress trying to walk through the freezing cold
So
water.
it's the details that we cannot see where you really manipulate the image to give us that feeling. So let's talk a little bit about your ideas. I know from viewing your work that you work with a wide range of subject matter, and you stated that it really all began with the birth of your son, so those would be portraits of your son. But you work with a lot of different elements and landscapes and subject matter. Where do these ideas come from, and can you share the process of how the ideas germinate and how they come through?
Yeah. There were a lot of projects when I was thinking about working with water. I would generally try to think about which emotion I wanted to go for first. So what type of water would feel desperate? And when I thought about that, it was, and then I thought about other words that feel desperate. And maybe that comes from sort of creative writing, like clinging. And then I thought about, okay, water can be clinging to the surface of glass. What else can we do? Just the water by itself, we need to put more in that scene to really convey the message. So a lot of those I had sort of done as self-portraits and put myself in the scene to be another actor in the image. But really the water is the star of the image. If it were just...
So I noticed with several of your images that you put yourself in the frame, whether it's the appearance of walking on water or whether you are showing yourself in a shower, surrounded by droplets and in a black and white treatment. Can you explain to us why that is? Is it because you have more control of the shot to fulfill the vision that you have?
Yeah, I think it is. And I don't have paid models. It's either myself or trying to convince a friend or my husband or my son to get in the shot. And so when it needs to be creative things like that, it takes me a long time to set it up, and it takes a lot of patience. So I feel like I'm the only one who will put up with myself and do those. And it is an extra challenge to get the focus right and be behind the camera and in front of the camera at the same time.
Right.
So that is a little bit challenging, but...
Right. And so there's a lot of talk today, especially centered around women and having it all, meaning having a career, having a family, living a balanced life, which would assume that we as women are pursuing our interest. The $1 million question here is, how do you do it all? And do you feel that you have to make sacrifices in order to achieve that as both a pediatrician and a photographer?
I think doing it all just means being patient with yourself and carving out time when you can for certain things. Photography is a very forgiving hobby in that way, that if you want to put it down and not pick up the camera for 2 months because your rest of your life is so busy, you can do that and you can come back to it when you're ready. And in other times I can say to my family, I need some time for myself and I'm going to go out for a weekend and take my camera and carve out this time for myself. So you can take that either way, and it's very flexible. So I think just being patient and knowing that that can wait for me and it will still be there when I come back to it.
What are some of the scenarios? Where have you received some of your inspiration and at some of the craziest times, you know, while you're being a doctor, a wife, a mother, you know, running to hockey practice, cooking dinner, all of those things? Can you describe, you know, receiving that inspiration and when it was and how maybe you had to be patient to see that through?
Yeah, I will come up with ideas sometimes at night and it will keep me up all night just thinking of how I'm going to pull it off. Or while I'm driving, I spend a lot of time with the radio off just thinking about projects while I'm driving. And some of this, you know, a lot of the creative art that I've been doing over the last few years, I had a great instructor locally here that would hold evening classes and get a group of us together that were really interested in creative photography and creative art. And so he would give us these sparks to work on. And you'd spend a week just trying to think of the most creative way that you could showcase a word or a phrase that he would give at the beginning of class. So those kinds of exercises were really fun.
Have you given anyone in your family a picture that you've captured and created? Have you given those as gifts to loved ones?
Well, yes, I give them as gifts. And my mother is probably one of my biggest fans, and she hangs my artwork throughout their house all the time.
Probably that she's done since preschool, as we all have.
Yeah. So, yeah, and my sister also. My sister lives in Florida, so she gets to see all my work online usually. But there are a lot of pieces that she said, "I want you to print that and send it to me." And so she's got a lot of things up in her house too. My niece, her daughter is a painter, so they like to compare the things that she has created in paintings that I've sort of had a similar vision in a photograph, and she'll hang them right next to each other, which is really fun.
Now, on being a physician, and specifically a pediatrician, can you say that early in life you knew that was a direction you wanted to follow? And how would you describe your inspiration to becoming a physician?
Getting to where I am as a physician was a process of keeping an open mind.
Okay.
It is not something that I knew I wanted to do early on. I went to college as a marine biology major.
Did you?
And it wasn't until getting near the end of college that I realized this wasn't what I thought it would be when I went into it. And sort of reframing and rethinking the whole process of, all right, why did I start here and where do I ultimately want to end up? I knew I loved science, and I sort of took that step back and said, how else can I use science and what I'm good at and move on in a different career? And I think I do that a lot with art as well, in that you have to be okay to try something and fail it, and you will often get something better in the end. So I will go out with an idea to shoot a particular photograph, and I'm not happy with what's happening. I'm not happy with the results, and I keep trying to manipulate the scene or the lighting, and then I discover something else in the process. and it becomes a whole different project. But it's just because I went out with the first idea and allowed that idea to go by the wayside and get on a different track.
Do you use science in photography, and then do you use creativity in practicing medicine?
I do use science in photography, and I'll do things like, what kind of solution can I mix up to get ice crystals to look like crystals, and those kinds of sort of geeky art and science things all mesh together. And I do think medicine does require some creativity. You do need, it can't all be cookbook. You treat X with Y. You have to sometimes think outside of the box when things aren't going like you expect, and take that step back and look at everything fresh again.
Does photography give you a relief from maybe the stress of being a physician and treating patients?
It absolutely does. I mean, it's just having a creative outlet so that you can use those other parts of your brain that, and you can sort of manipulate the things that you can't in real life, and you can just create something beautiful out of what's in front of you.
What would you tell young people, teenage students in school who are thinking, I really need a plan, what are my career objectives, what should I major in? Now that you've accomplished quite a few things, and in addition to being a wife and the mother of an 8-year-old boy, how would you direct teenagers today?
I tell them it's okay to change their mind. It's okay to be on one path and realize that there's something else that you love that you want to do. I think it's really hard at 18 to sit down and choose your career for the rest of your life. That's almost impossible from where I sit and look at things. So to be patient and to be okay with trying something and changing course.
I would love to hear from you descriptions, how you describe some of your work that is on display at the James. Okay. Could you name the photograph and then describe what you've created?
Sure. I think Delicate Defiance is a good one to talk about. It's a black and white photograph, and again, a self-portrait, where I am in the shot, but the star of the image is the water that's there. And it's just a fine mist of water. And when I thought about mist and how delicate that is, I put myself in the scene in just a very delicate dress, but standing very defiantly in a silhouette shot, thinking about how that fine mist, as small as it is, it still won't fall to gravity. It just stays in the air. And if that shot was taken without the water, if there were no mist in the air, it would just be a silhouette. There's a huge contrast in the air with the air is all white and the silhouette is black. And it gives that yin and yang of delicate and strong and white and black. And I think that turns out to be a very powerful image, but you need the water to do it.
You do, and then I think a contrasting photo that I would love for you to describe is a scene from nature along the river with a bright red boat.
Yeah.
Can you share with us your description and what you were capturing there?
So that really has the feel of Cape Cod to me. It's just an iconic sort of Cape Cod image, and it is just a summer night with a beautiful river and just one single red boat sitting in the river. But what I really love about that shot is when you put it next to a different shot that I have that's called Winter Pond. And you can see, just by looking at it, you know what time of year they both were. And there's something that happens in your brain just seeing the colors of it. Because we all know, even though you don't think about it, you know that in the wintertime, the light, the natural light is cold, it's cool, it's blues, it's grays, it's stark white. And in the summertime, natural light is yellows and oranges. It casts that hue to everything. So even though both of those photographs are a similar composition, they've got a boat, they've got water, they've got this lake and trees around, just in a split second you look at them and know that's summer, that's winter. Even the winter when there's no other cues to ice or snow, but you know it's cold. And it's just the color of the natural light in that time of year.
Laura, I understand that you are local to Norwell now. Can you share some inspiration that has come directly from this area and describe images that you've captured here?
Yeah, so just in your own backyard sometimes there are things right in the town that you live in, and you don't have to travel far to get some beautiful images. So there's one here in the show that is just a snowy scene, literally from my yard in Norwell, of these beautiful trees that are just covered in this blanket of snow. And was one of those, the morning light was beautiful, and I stepped out the door to bring my son to the bus stop, and that was what was in front of me, and I ran back in and grabbed the camera.
Did he miss the bus? Or
No, we still got to the bus, too.
That's talent.
Yep. The other one, there is another one that's Norwell in the show that is an image of the North River that I think people wouldn't recognize it as the North River because of the creative process that I did to shoot it. And it is a double exposure, which means the camera shutter is open and then it records the next photograph on top of the first. And what I did was take a photograph of the river and a bridge and then flip the camera upside down and take the same photograph again. So it's superimposed on itself, and it creates this really otherworldly, sort of misty image of that river and the bridge that people wouldn't recognize that that's where it's from.
Did you stumble across that, or had you seen that particular location before and you went back for that exact purpose and shot?
That location is, I drive by it all the time, and I know that it's beautiful, and I had been playing with that technique in other ways, just trying to do double exposures with different things. And so I tried it there, and I loved what came out of it. So,
where can people find your work?
Well, when it's not hanging here at the James,
Right.
I have a website. It's ljcphoto.com, and people can view what's new on there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone today for joining us at Spotlight on the James with photographer and physician Laura Cardello. Until we meet again.